You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher.
Fire Lord Ozai might be a completely psychopathic a-hole, but was he wrong when he said that? Did Zuko not actually suffer before he found redemption? The truth is, villains have always predicted the future for the hero, and even for us. This is why, as kids, we loved heroes, and as adults, we understand villains. So today, we will be looking at every time villains tried to tell us something. When we were studying what many villains have tried to tell us these past years, we noticed a very strange pattern. You see, no matter which studio produces the villain, the deeper meaning behind their famous quotes usually points to one final lesson. But the craziest part of all of this is that the first and the last lessons come from the same movie, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. The first one was made by Jack Horner when he said,
"Can't bake a pie without losing a dozen men."
Jack might have laughed over something that awful because he's obviously a terrible person. But that line has a deeper meaning. The first meaning is as straightforward as sacrificing something valuable for your own selfish gain. We'll talk more about this later when we address the lesson that Jafar tried to teach us. But for now, let's focus on the second meaning of Jack's line, the duality of life. Good and bad have to coexist. It's like that old philosophical concept of yin and yang, where order and chaos have to live together in a circle for things to stay balanced. Normally, pie is something sweet, and this represents the good part. However, killing a dozen men is something terrible. Yet, in Jack's world, it is a necessary sin. And here's the funny thing, this logic doesn't only exist in Jack's twisted mind. In Naruto, one of the villains, Madara Uchiha, gives us a clearer lesson.
Wherever there is light, there will always be shadow to be found as well.
Madara believes that as long as there is a concept of winners, there will always be losers. He's basically acknowledging that good and bad have to coexist, something many of us already know. But then he continues with a more chilling truth. He says that even when we choose to be good, it doesn't mean that we have escaped doing evil. He laments that as we try to do something really nice, like make peace, our selfish desire to keep that peace is often what starts the next war. He argues that hatred is actually born from the desire to protect the people we love. Victor from Arcane put a giant exclamation point on this idea when he said that the very thing that inspires us to our greatest good is also the cause of our greatest evil. He said this after we watched Isha kill herself to protect the ones she loves. It's a terribly sad scene that serves as another way of saying that the more you care about something, the more dangerous you might become to protect it. It's like how a mama bear is the sweetest thing to her cubs, but the scariest thing to a hiker. The good and the bad are literally made of the same stuff. But as far as the duality of life goes, Silco delivers the biggest blow at the beginning of Season 1, Episode 3, titled The Base Violence Necessary for Change. First, we hear a chilling score made up mostly of vocalization. Then we hear Silco's voice.
Ever wonder what it's like to drown? Story of opposites.
Silco explained this duality by telling a story about what it's like to drown. He called it a story of opposites. He described the water as being peaceful and calm, like it's whispering to you to just let go and let all of your problems fade away. But at the exact same time, there is something in your brain that is raging. It's lighting up every nerve with madness, screaming at you to fight and survive. That is the duality of being alive. We have a part of us that wants peace, and a part of us that is a monster willing to do anything to stay standing.
There's a monster inside all of us.
Of course, Jack Horner is a complete monster, so he doesn't count. But the world is actually made of people who are constantly balancing the light and the shadow, the peace and the madness, all at once. But knowing you have a dark side is only half the battle. The real danger starts with what villains like Frollo try to tell us about ourselves. At the very start of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, we see a scene that defines the word cruelty. Judge Claude Frollo chases a terrified woman up the steps of a cathedral, kicks her to death, and prepares to drown her baby in a well because he thinks the child is a monster. When he is caught, he simply looks at the blood on the stone and says his conscience is clear and he is not guilty.
I am guiltless. She ran, I pursued.
Years later, he traps a family inside their home and sets it on fire, and when his captain refuses to help, Frollo sentences him to death too. Yet this is the same man who stands in the shadows of his fireplace and sings with absolute pride that he is righteous.
Oh, I am a righteous man. Of my virtue I am just proud.
That line is a punch to the gut. It is shocking to watch a man commit so many heinous crimes and then still think of himself as pure and sinless. And yet, Frollo truly believes himself to be a judge chosen to clean up a sinful world. And once that picture of himself was set, his mind began to play a dangerous game. If he hurts someone, he calls it justice. If he feels a desire like lust, he says he was tempted. But what does this have to do with us? Well, with that line, Frollo is teaching us something about identity and how people usually create theirs. When he called himself righteous, whereas his actions tell otherwise, it is because his identity is built on a lie. This is the psychological trap that Silco from Arcane explains so perfectly. He says, quote, "We build our own prisons, bars forged of oaths, codes, commitments, walls of self-doubt, and accepted limitations. We inhabit these cells, these identities, and call them us."
We build our own prisons.
Frollo's cell was made of the word righteous. He swore himself to a strict code of purity and control. Those oaths turned into iron bars, and he decided early on that he was a righteous man chosen to judge others. Once that belief settled in, every action he took had to fit inside it. His identity is a shield that protects him from ever having to feel shame or guilt. This is exactly how the human mind works. When we cling to a story about being the good guy, we will bend the truth until it breaks just to keep that story alive. Silco's line about walls of self-doubt also fits. Deep down, Frollo feared his own weakness, which is why he sang his iconic Hellfire song. He was terrified of the parts of himself that did not match his holy image, but instead of accepting that fear as part of being human, he hid it and doubled down on his cruelty. But the painful thing about our identities is that they often leak out and shape the people around us. We see how Frollo's identity also built a cage for Quasimodo. He gave the boy a name that means half-formed, hid him in a bell tower, and whispered every day that the world would hate him. After years of hearing that, Quasimodo became all he heard. He saw himself as a burden because the man who saved him needed him to be one. It shows us that one person's self-image can easily become another person's prison, just like what Mother Gothel also did with Rapunzel. There's another important lesson, however, that we failed to mention, which is very peculiar to both Frollo and Mother Gothel. But the best person to explain this lesson is Jafar. We all love the look of success. We run after and idolize famous people, and we wish we could be as rich as the wealthiest men and women. But very rarely do we ever ask how they became successful. This is why Jafar warns that
things aren't always what they seem.
Jafar wants the throne of Agrabah, and he knows the world will not just hand it to him. So he turns to lies and dark magic.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, my lord.
His desperation shows us that to reach the very top, you often have to do things that would make a normal person's skin crawl. Ursula echoes that same rule when she laughs that life is full of tough choices.
Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?
This tough choice can involve selling your soul to the devil. Remember Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog? Well, he deals with things like this Through him, we learn what folks are willing to do to get money and relevance. We will get to the Doctor again, but for now, do you notice something? So far, we can see clearly what villains like Jafar are willing to do for success. Ursula takes the voice of a small, naive child, and Jafar uses hypnosis on the Sultan, amongst other terrible things. And they do all this right in front of our eyes. But in real life, the case is different. This is another reason why Ernesto de la Cruz from Coco is such a well-written villain. He shows us that, yes, things aren't always as they appear. When we first hear about him in the story, he had the kind of legacy every aspiring musician aspires to. Miguel, like many kids, wanted to be like him. He wanted to seize his moment like Ernesto said he did. And everything the kid does shows how driven Ernesto's philosophy has made him. However, when he mistakenly stumbles into the land of the dead, Miguel soon learns what the saying, "never meet your heroes," actually means. All that talk of seizing your moment, well, the kid soon discovers what Ernesto meant by it. Indeed, success doesn't come for free. But Miguel quickly learns that there was more to that.
You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to seize your moment.
Miguel must have thought to himself then, so poisoning his best friend to steal his songs was what Ernesto meant by seizing your moment? The kid must have learned the same thing Syndrome did when he said you can't count on your heroes.
You can't count on anyone, especially your heroes.
It's a terrifying lesson for Miguel. But Ernesto is a mirror for the real-world powerful people. Right now, we are hearing about things like the Epstein files. And guess what? Ernesto represents that Epstein-level reality where oftentimes folks who are at the top are the most devilish set of humans. But do you know what's truly sad? It never ends. Even after offenders are exposed for their heinous crimes, there will still be more Ernestos.
Apologies, old friend, but the show must go on.
Maybe the only little consolation we get sometimes is that the villain, or the person chasing success at any cost, still loses in the end in two ways. Think about Tai Lung from Kung Fu Panda. He spent his whole life training to get the Dragon Scroll, thinking it held the secret to ultimate power. But when he finally got it, it was empty. It didn't change the sadness or the anger inside him. He got the prize, but he stayed the same broken person. Likewise, Ernesto seized his moment, but he lost his only real friend and ended up being hated once the truth came out. This is the ultimate warning Dr. Facilier left us with. The doctor was selling success, but he also knew that while you're getting what you want, you're also losing what you already have. We see this all the time today, with famous people who come out and say that despite the millions of dollars and the fame, they feel empty and unfulfilled. They got the success the world told them to want, but along the way, they lost their peace, their friends, and their souls. So far, all of these things that villains have been trying to tell us have mostly been about the self. Now, we're going to expand our horizon, but you have to prepare yourself for what comes next because we might ruffle a few feathers on our way to the ultimate lesson. In The Lion King, Scar opens with one of the most painful truths of our existence.
Life's not fair, is it?
We are all familiar with that sequence. Some are born into wealth and power, others start with nothing. That same idea sits at the heart of a bug's life. There are those who eat while others struggle and suffer to gather the food. Hopper quickly understands this dynamic, so to get ahead, he uses the psychology of fear to rule over the ants. He was also aware that he shouldn't have this advantage because he knew the ants had the real power, so he was always wary. But eventually, the ants find out that the fairness of life should actually be on their side because they have the number and the resources. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the human race. In the human world, Hopper and his goons still rule. They represent the 1% of the world, the super rich elite who are in control of the majority of the world's resources. These guys basically run everything despite their extremely small number. The world's economic, technological, and political resources? Yup, they belong to the whims and caprices of this elite group. According to Jafar from Aladdin, it is this way because of the golden rule.
Whoever has the gold makes the rules.
In a world run by capitalism, power follows the money. Jafar knows that if you have enough gold, you own the law. He even shows us how the world hides its crimes. He says if you steal an apple, you're a thief, but if you steal a kingdom, you're a statesman. This is why we see powerful families get away with things that would ruin a normal person, because the scale of the theft determines whether you're put in chains or on a throne. But for the gold to stay with the few, there has to be a sacrifice from the many. This is the dark side of the production lines that make our world run. Here, Lord Farquaad gives us the most honest corporate slogan in history.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Farquaad represents the side of power that views humans as fuel. To the person at the top, a worker in an underdeveloped nation is just a number on a spreadsheet, a necessary sacrifice to keep the kingdom going. But when you live in a world where you are just a sacrifice, you sometimes get to the conclusion that you are disposable. This is the bitter truth Lotso and Stinky Pete learned the hard way. Lotso finds out that he is nothing but a piece of plastic made to be thrown away. He knows that in a world of endless buying and selling, love is just a temporary contract. You are useful until you are broken, and then you are disposed. Stinky Pete saw this coming and tried to freeze himself in a museum. They both realized that once you are no longer marketable, the world has no use for you anymore. It's similar to companies laying off workers that no longer meet the monthly quota. Granted, Lotso and Pete took things a little too far and even became the thing they complained about, but you can't deny that they had a point. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop with them. Eventually, someone like Syndrome comes along and tries to break the whole system. He wants to give power to everyone so that when everyone's super, no one will be. He sounds like he's trying to be fair, like a Marxist trying to level the playing field, but his plan still treats power as a product to sell. He chases equality through the same market logic that created the gap. Value drops, competition returns, and the cycle starts again. If everyone is super, this also means evil people like Jafar and Frollo will be super as well. This will then create a demand for even more superpowered supers, which is basically how things were before. So Syndrome wouldn't be helping anybody whatsoever. Besides, this is not counting the murders that he committed to get to where he was at that moment. At the end of the day, these villains are warning us that the circle of life is actually a machine that uses people up and throws them away, and the only rule it follows is money. But whether or not you think they're right, you must agree with this next thing an unconventional villain tries to tell us.
Superheroes are part of your brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation.
That was the Screenslaver, warning us about the dangerous over-reliance on superheroes. Look, by now it's already old news that Evelyn Dever of The Incredibles 2 was trash. But the truth is, before she was revealed as a terrible twist villain, she served as an important lesson for everyone. As the Screenslaver, she laments that instead of going out and having our own adventures, we would rather sit on a couch and watch a hero do it for us. She points out that we don't talk anymore. Instead, we watch talk shows. We don't play games, we watch game shows. She warned that every meaningful thing in life, travel, relationships, and even risk is being packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance. Why? So that we can stay ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers. Psychologically, she's saying that the more we look to others to save or entertain us, the more powerless we actually become. We think we are being looked after, but Screenslaver warns us that the system is actually stealing our lives while we snack on our couches. Now imagine if we ignored that warning for 700 years. That's exactly how we get to the world of WALL-E. By the year 2805, humans have become so reliant on technology that they can't even stand up on their own. They live on a giant spaceship called the Axiom, where robots do everything. They are surviving, but they aren't really living. This is where we meet Otto, the ship's autopilot. Otto is a machine following a directive called A113. Centuries ago, a leader decided it was too hard to fix Earth and told the robots to just keep everyone in space forever. When a tiny green plant is found, it's proof that Earth is healthy again. It's proof that humans could go home and participate in life once more. But when the captain gets excited, Otto coldly shuts him up.
Look at this plant! Green and growing! It's living proof he was wrong!
Irrelevant, Captain.
What?
Otto believes that on the ship, everyone is safe and clean, so leaving that comfort is irrelevant. Like some humans today, the captain finally realizes the horror of their situation. He looks at Otto and complains about how all they've done in the ship is nothing. But Otto still continues to hammer on the idea of surviving rather than actually living. Otto's relentlessness can be likened to how technology continues to create more and more convenience for us, the kind that isolates us from actually living. The machine represents the idea that as long as you are breathing and fed, everything is fine. He is the payoff of Screenslaver's warning. Because the people became passive and let the supers or the AI handle everything, they lost their home, their health, and their purpose. So we have talked about the dark price of success, the prisons of identity, and the unfair games the grasshoppers play to stay in charge. But now we have to talk about the one thing that stops every villain, every hero, and every king in their tracks. You see, it doesn't matter if you have all the gold in the world like Jafar, or a legacy like Ernesto. Where does it all end? With a cold whistle in the dark. It ends with death. In our world today, rich people try to use science and technology to live forever. Rich people like Brian Johnson and Peter Thiel. They spend millions on anti-aging protocols because they are terrified of the finish line. But the villain Death from Puss in Boots looks at all that and just laughs.
Everyone thinks they'll be the one to defeat me, but no one's escaped me yet.
He is the ultimate reality check. He reminds us that mortality is the only thing that is actually fair. You can cheat at the game of wealth, and you can lie about your identity, but you cannot negotiate with the end. Death was especially angry with Puss because Puss had 9 lives and didn't value a single one. He finds the idea of extra lives or cheating the end completely absurd. This is a warning to us. When we spend our time chasing power or hiding in our comfort cages, we are wasting the only life we actually have. But when Puss finally stands up and fights, Death spares him and leaves us with a heavy assignment.
Live your life, Puss in Boots. Live it well.
Death is saying that the only reason life is special is because it ends. If it went on forever, our choices wouldn't matter. So let us live it right while it lasts. But he doesn't forget to tell us that no matter what you choose to do with the life in the end, he will still come for you.
You know we will meet again, right?
Sí, hasta la muerte.
The other villains told us how the world runs, but Death tells us why we should care about how we run our own lives before he finally catches up. Is it weird that Death also ended our last video about every time a villain was one step ahead? But the difference is, Death serves a different purpose there. So you should go check it out.